Bitcoin bouncing back big, going positive for the year. So is this rally here to last? Let's bring in Grayscale Investment CEO Michael Sonnenschein, the man pushing hard for the next Bitcoin ETF. Michael, great to have you with us.
Great to be here.
I actually want to start off with GBTC, which is trading currently at about a 20% discount to its net asset value. You have said in other interviews that if the SEC rejects your plan to convert to an ETF, that you would explore all options. What does that include?
Well, I think really, Melissa, this is really about continuing to work proactively with the SEC. Grayscale's history around GBTC goes all the way back to 2016. And so working together to develop the guidelines for becoming an SEC reporting company and now pushing those boundaries to have the SEC even out the playing field for us to have GBTC become an ETF. And so we will continue to put the full resources of Grayscale behind this initiative, but we're really now calling on investors to partake in this process as well.
What is the reasoning that you've gone from the SEC as to why they're hesitant about this, and what are your counter arguments?
Well, the SEC has cited time and again concerns over the underlying Bitcoin market, the potential for fraud and manipulation, or a lack of surveillance in the underlying Bitcoin market. Now what we find ourselves is a world in which there are Bitcoin futures ETFs, but still a rejection of the underlying Bitcoin spot ETFs like GBTC's application. And while it's a very, very important milestone for us to have Bitcoin futures ETFs here in the US, the futures contract itself does not solve any of the underlying concerns that the SEC may have about Bitcoin. And thus, we really think the SEC should do the right thing, protect investors, and allow both of these product types in the market.
So when you say all options, does that include a lawsuit? I mean, what is the recourse for a company like yours if the SEC does eventually reject? I don't want to say eventually. Should the SEC eventually reject the bid?
There are certainly the options to get into legal arguments around this. One of the most prevalent comment letters that has been submitted now around the GBTC conversion is actually the potential for an APA violation where a regulator is not looking at two like issues through the exact same lens. So come July, all options are certainly on the table. But between now and that time, again, it's really important that all GBTC holders participate in this process.
So what is the marketing sort of aspect of this all? Your GBTC product versus the current products on the market, the futures ETFs, the futures products. I mean, is it that if you buy GBTC here, you're getting a discount to Bitcoin, and that eventually that premium will close and you get a 20% shot higher? Or, I mean, this is not the product that most closely tracks Bitcoin.
Well, there are certain differences between the futures products and the potential for a spot ETF, right? You have roll costs and other elements of the futures products that do erode away at the investor's ability to effectively track Bitcoin. Certainly today, investors have the opportunity to buy Bitcoin in the spot market or buy Bitcoin exposure through GBTC, at 80 cents on the dollar. And one would expect that to converge with net asset value if it's approved to be an ETF. But importantly today, Melissa, there are over 800,000 accounts in the US that own GBTC today, retirement accounts, ETFs, mutual funds across all 50 states. And so we really want to encourage, again, investor participation and understand that they have an important role to play here as the SEC weighs this important decision.
All right, Michael, great to see you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Michael Sonnenschein of Grayscale. We spent time on this because there is this issue. If you own GBTC, there is a cohort of people who own this thing thinking that gap will close. Right, exactly. You'll get a 20% pop, theoretically, if the SEC approves an ETF. And we're waiting here.
I'll be shocked that they don't approve the ETF at some point, and I think it's ultimately fantastic for the asset class. Obviously, I think regulation is not the issue. Michael just said it. They welcome working with the SEC. The decentralized nature of this does not mean it should be run roughshod. And I also always say I also want my treasury to know where and keep track of the currency and the exchanges between the dollars. So ultimately, I will point out also that Bitcoin is up up about 35% since Russia invaded Ukraine. And I think there is some correlation between central banks and other players around the world saying they don't agree with Russia, but the fact that the U.S. can freeze Russian assets, that the Europeans can freeze assets, I think that bothers the Chinese. I think it bothers a lot of other people. And I do think it's dollar negative, and I do think it's Bitcoin positive.
And then the other factors that are dollar negative, of course, central banks wanting to potentially move away from the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, Grasso. All this, bullish for Bitcoin here as we sit at these key levels.
Yeah, I think it's all bullish for all crypto. I actually own the Grayscale Ethereum trust. That's been up pretty aggressively as well pretty recently. But I think the takeaway that Michael had just said and Tim touched on, the regulators seem to be warming to this idea, and it's no longer this thing out in the stratosphere. This is happening, and we're gaining market share, and it's bullish.